Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. Today we have Netflix 178th film from 2019. It's the French drama Street Flow or Banlieusards. It's directed by Leila and Kery James. It stars Jammeh Diangana, Bakary, Diombera, and Kery James as well. I'm Jesse and I'm here with MJ. How are you?
You are here with MJ. I'm good. How are you?
Yes, it's good. We got to go to the movies last night together, so that was exciting. So got to spend a little bit of time with you, which is nice.
We did go to the movies, and here we are. I was thinking we obviously do this podcast about Netflix films, and it's not that we're advocates for streaming services per se. We still absolutely love going to the movies. We still love the traditional idea of getting to a cinema. And we actually commented about how Thursday night in Melbourne, it was kind of sad how quiet it was at the movies. I feel like back when I was a bit younger, Thursday night was quite a boom movie night. Obviously, that's the first in Australia when new movies always come out on the Thursday. It was a little bit sad, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. There was the gold classes all locked up. We got out a bit after 9 or whatever, and everything was all shut down. It was we got served by some quite fresh people that didn't know what they were doing, and just didn't feel like the movie experience. We had people eating KFC next to me. It's just like people have forgotten how to live.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. Although, in fairness, we did get served by a man who had a big trainee sticker on his badge, and that makes me happy that they're still hiring people. So they're not going anywhere. They're still looking to build and grow.
And that dude it took about 15 minutes for us to get 3 tickets and some candy bar stuff. Oh god! But no,
we'll go again soon.
Movie experience is always fun, but we're going to talk today about a streaming experience. So we do our Fast Flicks to start the show off. So it gives us a quick summary of what we're talking about. What is Street Flow, not Fast Flow. Street Flow all about?
Street Flow. I've got a family grapples with connectivity as each of the 3 brothers go down different routes in their life to try and keep their head above water in a dangerous community.
Very nice. I've used a couple of different antonyms. I think that's the right word, what you've used. So yeah. I've just said 3 brothers, each on a different path instead of route, and try to work their way out of lower class life. Oh, God.
Yeah, good.
All right. This is obviously an international film. We will spoil it as we go along. So if you want to check it out, go check it out and come back. But what were you able to find out about how this arrived on our streaming services?
Yeah, it is obviously, as you said, it's a French film. So Netflix announced that this movie was coming to its streaming service on the 28th of November in 2018. During that announcement, they also mentioned they were bringing 3 other French new TV series, and they'd acquired 4 new French films and documentaries. And by the time Street Flow was released in 2019, it is worth noting that, and I think to this day it's still true, that a new Netflix film is more or less precluded from theatrical release in France. They've got a 3-year gap that you need to have before you can play on the big screen to the small screen. So where Netflix in other markets sometimes releases some of their big titles in cinemas for a couple of weeks before it comes onto the streaming service, France wouldn't allow to do that. If they release it in cinemas, they have to wait 3 years before they could actually do it. So that's a different wrinkle. For this reason, Netflix movies are actually excluded from appearing at Cannes Film Festival because to be eligible, they have to have been released in a cinema in France. Makes sense because no Netflix movies are being released in cinemas in France. And that feud between Netflix and Cannes is still going on today, as far as I can tell. Cannes more or less sees Netflix as a bit of a threat to the cinema experience. Interestingly, we just spoke about that before we started talking about this film, but I think they see it as a threat to the industry as a whole. In 2021, they basically had a dig at other festivals for allowing Netflix movies to be there, basically giving them too much rope, letting it be too seamless. But despite all that, Netflix has invested really heavily in France quite recently. The country itself is arguably one of Netflix's hottest markets in Europe, one of their most important ones worldwide. They opened up a new office in Paris. They expanded their team there. And they continue to announce a bunch of French productions and partnerships with that local community. I don't know if you know the French language heist series Lupin. gets a good run. I see every time I jump on Netflix, it's quite high up there. But that's obviously one of the more popular French series that does do well with English speaking markets.
And it's got a very good, it's got the worldwide appeal too, because it's based on a very famous character that, has been adapted across the world in, anime and all those sorts of things. So yeah, that they do obviously invest a lot.
Good context. In 2021, I found it interesting that France was the third highest European country in terms of Netflix subscribers, with 8.5 million, behind only the UK and Germany. So it's clearly a really important market for Netflix and their investment in French films like this one we're about to talk about. And I think that's likely to continue. We've done a few French films in the podcast already. It seems that despite the concerns that Cannes has with it, the wider population is still very happy to consume Netflix in the comfort of their own homes, and it's probably not going anywhere. So that's a long-winded slice of context for where Street Flow fits into the story. And as I said, that was announced late 2018, and then a year later, it was released on Netflix, October 12, 2019. And according to Netflix, over 2.6 million accounts watched Street Flow within the first week of release. And as we know, we do have a lot of French subscribers, which probably would have contributed to that figure.
Yeah, well put. I don't have an awful lot to add because you covered that really well. And I think the only thing that Kery James, one of the co-directors and stars in this, sort of mentioned that the difficulties that he faced in raising the money for this. And obviously, as we've mentioned, hundreds of times on this, that without Netflix's support, this would never have existed. So I think it's just sort of ties into that idea that there are a lot of people that are getting their thoughts and their visions and their ideas on screen because of the support from Netflix, which is it's kind of a good thing, I guess, in that, maybe we are at a stage where we're becoming overpopulated with the amount of content we can see, but it is nice to see creative sides getting those opportunities.
It's such a good point. And the argument that the Cannes Film Festival makes about Netflix taking away that cinema experience is true. Like, it's true that people watching new content at home 5 years ago felt like a bizarre concept. And I think everyone who had their ear to the floor knew that it was maybe trending that way. And I think a couple of years of a pandemic has sped up that process. But I remember thinking that the idea of, imagine like a brand new film coming out on a Thursday night and you'd pay money to watch it at home felt so strange. And now with Netflix original films, you're not even paying money for it. You've already got your subscription. There's going to be a big film release that comes out, like obviously last year, not that it was highly acclaimed, but Red Notice with 3 big Hollywood stars. You can just literally log on, sit on your couch and watch it. And that is new, and that is probably eating into people going to the cinemas. That's no doubt about that. But like you said, conversely, there's a lot of films being made. There's a lot of really talented filmmakers that wouldn't have had opportunities to make films without Netflix's services. And we say Netflix, I mean, everyone's got their own streaming service in some capacity as well now. So it's going to broaden out as much as we can. And there's big positives to it as well.
Yes, very true. So I mentioned in the info that the French title is Banlieusards, which direct translation is commuters. So, and it's sort of another way that it can be translated is that guys from the banlieue, which is in that word as well. So it's like the poor side of France where we see the poor side of Paris. So where we see these characters. And I think the English translation we might talk about later, it's possibly not as good as some of these other translations around the world, because Finland, it's called Raised in the Suburbs. Germany, it's called The Choice Is Yours, which still fits in nicely with what's said throughout. In Greece, it's called In the Brothers' Steps, and the mentality of brotherhood in this is very important too. The idea of siblings. And Poland, Sweden, brothers from the suburbs, similar again. Russia, suburbanites. Spain, it's just called Suburban, and Vietnam, it's called The Suburban Boys. So I think really right in a lot of different places for this title, and I think that the English one's probably the worst.
Yeah, and it's not to say the English one's bad either.
Yeah. What's the consensus from critics and audiences on this one?
Yeah, looking at IMDb and Letterboxd, it's very hard to say when we do an international film. I'm just not familiar with the amount of, say, people in France who use IMDb and Letterboxd. They're obviously predominantly English platforms, but nonetheless, it's a really nice 6.4 out of 10 on IMDb with just 1,500 ratings. And it's even higher on Letterboxd with a 3.4 out of 5, just over 1,000 or nearly 1,100 ratings. So small in the amount of ratings, but quite popular.
Yeah, on Rotten Tomatoes, there's only 2 critic reviews. They were both negative, so there's no consensus on that. And the audience had it at 62%. That's on less than 50. So audience still enjoying it, I guess. So I guess that's where we've got most of our ability to see what's going on. Not a lot of critics possibly seeing this one.
So does that say, again, I don't use Rotten Tomatoes very often. Does that say it's not fresh or it's rotten, or is it not just, it's just nothing?
It's nothing.
That's good, because that would feel so wrong to say it's rotten because 2 people didn't like it.
So you can see the 2 reviews and they both got rotten with them, but there's no overall result because there's obviously not enough. Yeah. No. Okay, we'll lead into your early thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I didn't mind it. I thought there's basically two main plots going on amongst, the family struggles that existed and all that kind of stuff. But there's Dem's life of crime versus Suleiman's more scholarly path. And I have to say, I connected so much more with Suleiman's story. I think the dangerous gang drug dealing life, it's just been done to death. And this movie brought nothing new to the plate in that respect. So the other struggle about trying to rise above it and work yourself out of adversity by using your brain and using your education was far more appealing to me. And I like the fact that it sort of highlighted the inevitable issues that you still face, but also showing a real path that's, more or less there if you want to take it. I just enjoyed that side of it and was I was a bit bored by the other side of it.
Yeah. It's a tricky one. It was okay. Like, I think the story, the characters and the arcs, they're done nicely, but I think this happens sometimes with international films where I'm not sure if the translation and what we're seeing on the screen, or just like the removal of some of the issues that aren't necessarily relevant to people outside of France, which makes a massive ideology dump, which was just too much for me. Just such explicit dialogue throughout, especially through Suleiman and Lisa. It was just a bit too on the nose for me.
It was very, there was no mincing words about what the film was trying to say. I do think in its defense, like the issues that we see are really, really universal issues around socioeconomic and racial stereotyping and things like that. That's not like it was a hard leap, but I do see what you're saying.
All right, we'll talk about some characters then. And like you said, there's really only 2 ones that we can really talk about.
I mean, I want to start with Suleiman because it was his story for me, and I just think that's just because I connected with it more. I think you could argue that it's very much a 50-50 movie, but I also like saying Suleiman. It comes off the tongue really nicely. There's a West Indian cricketer called Suleiman Ben, and it's always felt nice to say. Anyway, I'd love to say he loves his mum so much, and I think that's the overarching thing that you take out of this character, that it is his undeniable, unwavering love for his mother, and in turn, I guess, the family unit. But I do love how much he loves his mum. I think it's important to note that he's a really smart guy, and he recognizes that the inherent struggles of growing up with his background and in the neighborhood that he grows up in, it's not something that he wants to be a part of. But being passive in these issues, and despite his desire to move away from it, it's just not an option for him. It doesn't prevent him from being swept into all the issues that it brings with, just because of what he looks like, just because of where he lives. But I still think it's admirable that he recognizes that there is a path, and the education system doesn't actually seem to discriminate if you put the work in, and there are clear opportunities for you to do good, leave a footprint if you want to, and if you're inspired by that. He doesn't seem to ever be held back in his scholarly path as opposed to just the fact that sometimes he's a black man walking around the streets, which does run into issues. And I think that was interesting.
Yeah, it's very, very hard to add anything further because I think the easiest way for me to look at it is that they've gone, okay, we're going to have the down and out bad brother who does the wrong thing in Denver. Then you've got Nomook, who's the youngest, who's sort of a mix of the two. Like he could go down either path. He could go study or he could go down the path of crime. And then obviously you've got Suleiman, who's the epitome of, doing the right thing, dressing right, trying to study, try to get a career, become a lawyer, look after his mother, do the right thing by the family, volunteer his time, like all those right things. And as well, like that step in father role, I guess, as well, from the absence of a male role model in particular for the younger brother, Numook. But yeah, it's while it's nice, and yeah, I agree. This whole narrative is his story really, and what's going on, because the others sort of just play off to the side of it. It just seemed like there was very little, or the times they tried to show light and shade in his character were, and I'll probably talk about this in themes, it just was very disjointed, and it was like just following plot points to get to where he needed to be, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's definitely fair enough.
Yes. All right. What other brothers did you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, Denver obviously is the other side of the coin, as you sort of mentioned. And similarly, I think it's fair to say that Denver's a pretty smart guy as well. I think he recognizes where his greatest opportunity lies. And it's hard to ignore the positives that do exist with his gangster life of crime, and most notably that being the money that he brings in. But I guess the commentary is that by allowing yourself to earn serious money, you live in constant risk of losing your life, and every decision that you make has a consequence that's so much bigger than any other decision that someone else might be making. And it's even to the point of the relationships you have, the people that you bring into your circle, how much you can trust them, or things that they do that bring you trouble, bring you danger. And, the wrong person can get you killed. And that's that's the rub of it.
Yeah, it's exactly what you're talking about. It's like you either pick the life of have the superficial things that you want, and have the nice motorbikes, have the nice land and apartment blocks, and hang around with the seedy people, and do the not necessarily righteous or legal things that are correct, or you can do the right thing and struggle to get an education, follow rules, and still get harassed by police, still end up on the wrong side of the law, even though you're not doing anything wrong. So yeah, exactly right.
But it's a conscious decision. That's the main thing. It's this guy didn't just do it because he couldn't do anything else. I get the feeling he probably could have done other things, but he weighed up the pros and cons and thought, this is probably a really good opportunity for me. And Suleiman, if you look at it, he's doing it much harder than Denver is most of the time. Denver's obviously got higher risk in everything that he does, but Suleiman's life is tough. He's literally borrowing money from Denver to fund his life. Like, it's not an easy thing to do, and that's pretty flawed when you look at it. It's a pretty flawed system. When
Exactly.
I want to do the right thing and get a great education and have a prosperous career, but I can't really do that unless I've got someone who's doing the wrong thing to help me get through it. It doesn't really sit well.
Not at all. Any other characters that you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, Numook is the youngest brother, and this movie, he's kind of almost like the audience in a sense that he's the one who's exposed to both sides of what you can do, and he's in that impressionable position of deciding which path he might choose for himself. And initially, you can see it pretty clearly that he's enticed by the wealth that a life of crime can bring, and he already has that short temper and ability to get into fights, which is probably more from his environment rather than just who he is mentally. But he's definitely leading towards following in Denver's footsteps. But the appeal of Suleiman's sway with words and seeing him flex his prowess in that debate, Nomook notices the benefits of being armed with knowledge and does seem to be enticed by that as well.
I like that word, armed with knowledge, because it goes so well with, instead of having to arm yourself with weapons like Denver does, then you can arm yourself with words and knowledge, and that can be powerful in certain situations too. And yeah, I think that I like that you touched on too, the idea that he's like the audience, that you're trying to predict where this is going to go and what's going to end up with the characters, and he sort of shows you both sides in leading one way, then leading another way too. Directors, Kery James.
Two of them.
Yeah.
Well, Kery James obviously is Diombera. It's funny, when I was flicking through some reviews on Letterboxd, the amount of people that said I watched this movie because of Kery James, who is a French rapper, sort of singer, songwriter, dancer, record producer, also part of the French hip hop and rap collective Mafia K1 Fry. I'd be lying if I said I was familiar with Kery James. But apart from that, he's very little acting and no directing prior to this. So it's kind of his real first foray into the world of the cinematic universe. Obviously had a story to tell. And then you've got Leila, who's a co-director with him. And this is, from what I can gather, her first directing credit that wasn't a music video or a short. So pretty new to this scene too.
Yeah, I think from what I can gather, from what I've read, everything you've said is 100% on the mark, where and that's where they probably predict a lot of the audience from France got on board with this as well, is through Kery James because of his popularity. And I think Leila was brought on board because of work that she'd done with his music previously. So yeah, nice little story, I guess, but I can't really see the two of them working together on anything else really, because I think this is a passion project for Kery James.
And look, who knows? They might have just loved it and they want to bring out other ideas. But you can tell this is a story they wanted to tell, and that's kind of where it landed.
Good. All right. Well, that leads us into scenes. So, what are some things you enjoyed?
Yeah. Firstly, as I said, I immediately connected to the scene where Suleiman and Lisa got that debate topic. It was just such a change of pace to the world that I thought I was going to be watching. I just wasn't that interested in the first little bit of the movie because this, as I said, this drug stuff, this gangster stuff has been done to death, and seeing them in that, beautiful, what room you want to call it, but getting that debate topic and waxing lyrically about, their thoughts, their ideas, that little fun, flirty competition that they had. It was just nice. It just felt like, okay, maybe this movie is going to be more than just a down and out drug story about a family who's got their backs against the wall. So I really appreciated that. And that actually ties into the next scene that I liked, which was them on the rooftop garden. I thought it was quite a beautiful scene, but it got to a point where I was highlighting that there maybe be a little love story amidst this drama that was going on. And I like that Suleiman's story just connected with me so much more. I just wanted to see more of it. And when there was a little bit of a romance, I'm like, well, this guy's got a decision to make. Like, he's obviously like a stand-in father figure. We know that she's going to be, leaving Paris imminently, basically. And if there's a connection between these two, he's got to make a decision. And I like that. That was a story that I'd rather see than the drug stuff, as I said. So, those two really tie into each other. I thought probably the strongest scene of the film was in the hospital, and I think the main thing you notice here is that Numok is still a kid, because up to this point he's behaving badly, he's gone off the rails, and it's almost at the point where like, I'm going to go off and do my own thing. You can't control me. But this kid is so upset and so beaten down by the fact that his mum's sick, potentially almost died. And you really begin to notice that. But I think also on top of that, you notice that they're still a family. There's still so much strength in that unwavering loyalty that families can do when the chips are down. And Demba, who's more or less alienated from the family, becomes a part of it immediately. Like he's shaken up by all this, and that strength of the family unit is as strong as you've seen in any other film, and I do like that, despite the way it might have been portrayed before that.
Yeah, I think that I agree with you. I think this was one of the strongest scenes of the film, where just the way that the camera was positioned too, and obviously we'd seen previously that Demba was, the mum had yelled at him on the street, keep away from him. It was just nice to see the three brothers together for the first time in the one shot, and then obviously him holding the mother's hand with the camera focusing on that, but in the background you've obviously got the two other brothers sort of embracing each other, which it was nicely done and created that feeling of family between them, which we hadn't quite seen yet because they were very disjointed. So I further support what you said.
We hadn't seen it, and I didn't really know that we were going to see it. Like I didn't realize that that's where they were, and that's again, it's just a testament to the family values of it all. And the final one I do want to mention is the debate. I think the debate is the heartbeat of the film. It is a little bit on the nose because the debate is basically what this film is trying to say, and it's basically more or less a 10-minute scene of talking about the issues that this film is spending 90 minutes talking about. And that's strange, but I didn't want to remove myself from how great those performances were by both those people in that debate. I thought it was almost poetry in motion, the way that they were bouncing off each other, the passion that they were showing, and what they were talking about. It was still very meaningful. I think if you've got a film where you're going to have a debate in it, it's an opportunity to shoot a really good scene that looks great, sounds great, and you'd be crazy not to introduce a theme or talk to a theme that isn't a really important part of the film. In this case, it was almost too explicit. It would have been better if it was something that is quite different but still references the same points of it. But I thought it was really good to watch. I thought they did a great job. It came across really, really nicely, and I wasn't expecting it to be that good. I thought both of them excellent performances in that debate. It really stood out to me.
I probably my favorite scenes in relation to how the tension or the differences between the socioeconomics and the race. These were the two scenes that were done well, and I think that the first one for me was the kids on the bus. That on the bus drivers telling them, turn the music off. They're so rude, they're aggressive. You can see the fear in the people on the bus, and all we needed was the mother to sort of say, show some respect, sort of thing. And then they listened to her straight away, and I really liked that idea of the respecting the elders and the culture, and leaders like this of the older generation that are able to actually influence and make not necessarily decisions, but enable actions to be changed or things like that. And I think that tied in very well with the scene where he's running down the street to catch the train, and the police, pull him over for no reason, want to see his ID, all that sort of stuff. I think that they were done really well in context with the messages that we heard throughout the debates and things like that too. Like you got the state, the police proving their powers and all those sorts of things, and they were done visually really well rather than verbal dumps. So I enjoyed those scenes more probably than the debating. I think that I like the scenes too where Soul is sort of taking the younger brother Namoke's video games and the phone and things like that, where they just did it in this nice way, in that it's like, okay, you've been expelled from school. This is how it's going to be. If you're not at school, you're at home with me. I'm going to take on that role and support you in doing the right thing. So I like that. And then the final thing, like towards the end, the subtlety of Soul getting that certificate after the debate, and the mum putting it with the photos of the dad who's obviously missing, and that unfolding of the photo of Diombera as well. I thought that was a nice little touch that probably could have been a better finish to the film than what we actually did get.
Yeah, you could be right. Yeah.
All right. What are some things that you didn't like?
Yeah, not much. I think the fight scene near the start with Namoke at school, I just don't think that was done very well. I don't think it captured the damage that was caused. Firstly, I think they just kind of scuffled a little bit, and they both almost had like broken eye sockets. And it almost felt like a fight for the sake of a fight. I think we could have found a better way to get him expelled or something like that. It didn't. I don't. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it felt a bit clunky to me.
And they added the racial insult, and the part of it being the rival gang and stuff like that. It was like these little loose things to try and give a reason for it. So I agree with that.
Yeah, I not a scene, but I do think this film just suffered a little bit from the low production values. I thought the lighting and the color scheme felt really cheap, and it felt really amateur, and that stuff doesn't get in the way of a really good story, but it did take away from my experience a little bit. I felt like I was watching something very amateur, and I apologize for saying that, but it's just how I felt.
It's fair. That's it.
That was it. Yeah.
I got a couple to add. I think
Good.
the first shot with the gang sort of sitting in the car. I mean, it was just so obvious that this was going to be a shooting that it just, I don't know. We've seen those like, and there's a lot with this film that we've seen this done before in a different way. So I think a lot of the obviousness of things really like got to me. So like for example, the boxing scene where Demba takes the younger brother to the boxing to sort of build his character and introduce him to someone who's gone down and out from the career. It wasn't really needed. Like it just sort of frustrated me. It's like we need to have like a sporting connection or a montage or a role model that we need to implement. And the same with all the practicing or the recording of the speeches into the phones by Lisa and so like these words might look nice on paper, but when you're doing a visual form, they don't necessarily. And this could be through the translation as well, and looking at subtitles on the screen, it just felt real off for me.
I'm a dialogue man, Jesse. I love good dialogue. I get it; it's a little bit forced because it's not necessarily back and forth. But I don't know. I don't share your views on that. I get it's a visual medium and there's more you can do, but I don't mind watching a movie about a debate and seeing them come up with their arguments.
That's cool. And this is another thing that like I sort of enjoyed or thought that the scene with Sol being chased by the police was good, but the mini breakdown following that was just like a rushed, weird little situation where he goes to get weed, drinking, smoking on the rooftop, ignoring Lisa's calls, and then the music just becomes so dramatic, and you get that fake rain on the rooftop. It was just for that turning point that you're supposed to have for a character. It just it made me laugh, to be honest.
And he was so far away from having anything like that. And I'm not, it's not to downplay what happened to him and the impact that it had on him. Here's a guy who's literally spending his couple of weeks trying to formulate an argument about why this isn't the case, and he's just been slapped in the face by it. But it was way too dramatic. You're right.
Yeah, like it would have been better to just cut to him in the room with the anger, preparing for what he's going to argue, which they did do, but they just included this as like, we need to show more about how upset he is.
Even the anger was too much for me. He got way too angry.
And this is
he was such a cool guy. Like,
he didn't. Yeah, exactly. He could have dealt with it in a better way. And this is where I'm going to completely just like the final debate. I know that you liked it. I
knew you didn't. That's why I was arguing harder. I could tell.
For the big moment of the film, like you have it's same in like courtroom drama films. Like they're in this chamber, they're arguing against each other. They've had this conflict where they're not talking to each other, and for such a big moment of a film. And it's not necessarily the performances were, like you mentioned, the performances were fine, but just like the pans across the audience as if they're so captivated, and the the standing at the end, and the like just for the big moment of the film, I just thought it was complete rubbish. I apologize.
I was captivated. I was almost standing at the end. I'm so bad with debates. If you're good at debating, every time you argue, I will be like, this guy's going to win. And then they'd rebut and I'll be like, no, that person's going to win. Like, I get so convinced.
You're saying this while you're in your hand. People can't see this, but you've got like a judge's gavel in your hand, like whacking it.
This is a cricket bat mallet that you're knocking a cricket bat with. Sorry, it's sitting next to me at the desk. I didn't even realize that. Order.
I'm right. Oh, wow. Good timing. All right. Fill us in. What are some themes and some ideas?
Well, I mean, if you got 10 minutes, why don't you just watch the debate, and then you can see all the themes and ideas that they did have. But not the biggest theme of the film. I do want to talk about the fact that the movie did seem to forebode tragedy all along. There was that uneasy feeling of living dangerously. That was always going to happen. There was always going to be something that happened, and that kind of bothered me a little bit. But it just made me remember that this isn't a coming of age movie or a coming to terms movie or a broken family coming back together. This movie was social commentary as much as it was. And that final scene we've done our spoiler alert. Yep. the final shot of Demba getting shot just proves to you that this is all about social commentary. They have something to say about what is happening in their society, and they're not happy about it, and it doesn't feel right, and this is the result of it. Because Another movie would say this family who is disconnected, who have gone down really difficult paths in a really difficult society, have come together despite the odds, and are making it work. And they're two different movies. And maybe that second option doesn't tell the message as strong as it had to, which is why they did what they did. So I think it's important to note first off that this is social commentary more than anything else. Now, there's a big theme about family in this film, and I think it's captured and done really, really well, particularly when it's done about the strength of family, dealing with everything that you can, dealing with your differences when the chips are down. And obviously that social commentary I spoke about is, so much to do with the socioeconomic side of it and racial profiling and just literally the cards you dealt at birth and how you can't change them. You can do whatever you want to try and change them, but inevitably in the world we live in right now, it's really, really difficult to change the perception of it.
Yeah, very nicely put. I just lead in, and the idea that the difficulties of the minorities, I guess, the idea of low income, the crime, the handouts, having to work for your money, and then marginalized youth as well. Like, they promoted this idea of choices, and you've got to make that choice as to whether you're going to stand there and accept this idea that the representation of what the government or what the authorities are mainly non-minority people, and the police, the politicians, the lawyers, all those people aren't representative of the people that are struggling the most in this society. So I think that realistically it's a really good message, and I think it can be done really nicely, and in parts it was, but I think I just struggled with the dump of it in that final debate.
Yeah, fair enough.
What did you take away from this one?
Yeah, probably not straying too far from what we just spoke about. I think there were some interesting takes on a culture that I'm not familiar with, but still, I mean, as is proven by our conversation, still really universal concerns. I mean, I can't necessarily tell you the exact issues that they had in their society, but the general side of it, we see in basically every culture. And I think the other main takeaway I do have is that Suleiman story really did intrigue me, and the Denver stuff, which was still an important part of the Suleiman narrative, it just overshadowed it a little bit. And I think we spent too much time in a story that I've seen before and I wasn't interested in. I didn't care about the deals gone wrong. I didn't care about the other drug dealer that worked in the same town and they had their feud with and they were shooting at each other. I didn't care about any of that. And I guess that's to say that stuff wasn't done as well. But I just think there was too much of it. There was too much screen time of it, and I just wasn't interested in it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. The intro sort of, they try to set this scene with like the radio report with the hot weather and the record-breaking temperatures, and it's just so. This is done in a lot of films when you're trying to highlight tension or racial injustices, and Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing does this as well. It starts off the film exactly like that, but you see that run through the hoses going off in the streets and the scalding heat and kids trying to stay cool and things like that. Whereas it's like they've set that up to try and they're like, oh, that's a really cool idea. Let's have that.
They're telling you that it's hot.
Yeah, that it's hot. But then they just it's like, oh, we just put that in there because we wanted to pay homage, or it's a cool idea, and there's no follow through throughout. So
it didn't feel hot watching it. Like,
no, not at all.
I didn't pick up on that at all. Yeah,
but like that's the opening. So it's like, cool. I know what this is about. It's like this conflict that's going to happen, and it just didn't. It was like, might as well not have put that in there at the start.
Was it a French film that we did? Who Would You Take to a Deserted Island?
Did the same thing.
They did the exact same thing, but that movie felt hot. Maybe it's Spanish. You're right. Yeah. That felt hot the whole time. They actually followed through with
it. Yeah, good. Did you jump on IMDb to look anyone up?
No, I didn't.
Me either. So did you have any questions you wanted to ask?
Do you think the government is responsible for the... I can't remember the exact debate topic. If I was to ask you that question, though, do you think the government is responsible for the whatever they phrase it as, like the suburbs? Or...
Is the state solely responsible for the situation of the French suburbs?
What do you reckon? After watching that movie, do you have a take?
I don't know enough about French politics or the suburbs of France,
Based
but
on
from
the movie, though. Based on the movie.
based on the movie, I think that there are a multitude of factors, and it's definitely a factor that needs to be spoken about. But I don't think you can completely blame everything on one reason.
Yeah, that's fair. They're both really good arguments, though. I think they both argued it really well.
Really good. I said this like the title, like Street Flow. You've mentioned that you didn't necessarily connect a lot with Denver's character, so that title is more in relation to him and his side of things than anything else. So I really like the other ideas of this being about like the commuters, or because we see Soul traveling on the train all the time, trying to get from place to place, and he's obviously struggling to get there. He's always late, and he blames it on the government and all those sorts of things. I just like that title a lot more.
Yeah, I don't think that the title Street Flow doesn't talk to the fact that Suleiman is from that kind of street upbringing, and you sort of the flow is talking about the directions that everyone can go. I don't think it takes away from that as much, but I do think the commuter's title is pretty strong too.
Good. And I touched on this before. The final scene, um, like you mentioned, that idea of there's going to be some sort of grief, or something's going to happen. There's going to be something that happens here, and did we really need the shooting with a big scream of no as the camera goes up into the sky? Like, is that a good way to end this film, or could have we given a bit more? I don't know. I don't know how to state it, but I just feel like there was something a bit iffy with that ending, especially when then we saw the other brother studying a little bit.
Yeah,
sitting his exams as well.
He was late to his exams.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying, because the whole time watching this movie, I was just waiting for someone to get killed, basically, which takes away from it in a big way. But I don't know why it felt so meh to me, because there's a part of me that sits there and completely understands that you need to kill someone off in this story to truly get your point across about the issues that are happening and how we need to do something to fix it. Makes sense to me. As a film lover who connected with one of the characters, I kind of wanted the happy ending, happy family, because they'd shown their adversity, they got through it. But I understand why not. If you really wanted to make the point, then you kill off Suleiman instead of Demba, because Demba was much more expendable. If you really want to get that point across, people finish watching it and they're a bit shitty, and they go, "Oh, kind of wish you didn't do that." But the point gets across even stronger. So yeah, it's and maybe that feeling of like a bit, that last scene feeling a little bit like it just lacked any kind of punch or anything, might have had a little bit more to it.
And it was almost like they were trying to state that maybe it was going to be the younger brother as well on his way to the exams, that something he was going to get kidnapped or something was going to happen. And I think that still could have worked better as well than Demba, because that.
Well, that's the thing. The collateral damage, from something. I mean, the kid did something wrong himself, so I kind of get that. But you kill Suleiman, who the guy has, put a foot wrong his whole life. You kill him purely because he's accidentally been killed because of what his brother did. That's where you show that there's a true problem. The man who has stayed away from this problem his whole life still gets drawn into it. He didn't do anything, but he still, we've seen how his passive attitudes towards it can still get him pulled over by the cops for no reason. This is how far it can go. Exactly. That would have been a stronger ending.
I like that. Well, what are your final thoughts for this one? Let's bring it all together and give a rating out of 5.
Yeah, look, the movie was all right. There's a really strong voice in the narrative, and it was clearly a story that they wanted to tell for the right reasons. And for that, it makes it engaging enough to sit there and watch it. I don't think I was ever drawn too heavily into it. And as I said, that foreboding of the tragedy the foreboding was so strong that it felt like I wasn't moved at all by the time that it actually hit. And maybe doing something a little bit different, like we just spoke about, would have given strength to that ending. But I'm still giving it 3 stars.
Nice. Yeah, I think I probably made this clear throughout anyway, that the idea of the themes with words rather than visuals was probably the part that sort of threw me a bit with this, where I would have liked to have seen it more enacted throughout the characters and their situations than just through the debate, I guess. And that's because it's a visual medium. So I wouldn't mind, I don't mind listening to a podcast or something where someone goes backwards and forwards through this, or it's something on television, whereas this is a feature film. So I still think that ideas are decent and they need to be shared, but I don't think that this is a must watch when there are so many other films that deal with these themes and ideas in a much better way. So I'm giving it a 2 out of 5.
Yeah, makes sense.
Good. 2.5. So good. We're on socials. Check us out if you can. Give us a search. Question I just wanted to put out there was it unusual to see a film set in Paris without much romanticism? Because really the romantic connection played a bit of a backline in this. And you think of Paris as the city of love, like
City of Love.
Yeah.
It's a good question. And you know what? I'm a big advocate for there not having to be a romance in every single film that you make. And I feel like in more modern times, that's becoming more of a thing. I think there was a period there where every single movie you watch had some kind of romantic connection in some capacity, like it was a box that had to be ticked. So this film had it kind of like it was a box that had to be ticked, but I think it served a different purpose than actually some romance. It gave something for Suleiman to add to his list of how the hell am I going to tackle this next problem. So it's a good question though. Yeah, I like it.
Because I think I don't know whether they're based on what we've said. I don't know whether they did it purposely, but it can lead into that idea that that's the struggles of this side of Paris, is that it's really hard to be able to have any romantic connections because you're so focused on where the police are, what struggles, how you're going to get food. We've only got eggs in the fridge. That's all we can have for dinner. Those are more higher priorities than worrying about going out on a date.
Falling in love. Yeah. It's a good point. And look, this is the side of Paris that we don't have movies about. When they talk about it being the city of love, they're not talking about this side of it, and you can't just ignore it. It's a part of it.
There was another. I think maybe you missed this one. There's a Netflix film I did called Paris is Love, or Paris is Us. And it's very much about that, but it had the social disconnection in the background of what was going on. So I think it just felt weird looking at this film compared to that, when that was so focused on the idea of a connection between two people, whereas this one, obviously, possibly purposely as well, has gone a different way. So good.
Why is Paris a city of love, Jesse? I've never been, and I'd hate to go there and feel let down. What would I be expecting?
I didn't like Paris, so I'm probably not the right person to be asking that question. I found it really dirty and not my favorite place in the world. So, I mean, the Eiffel Tower, it's nice to go out and check it out, but the homeless situation and the gypsies that hang around that area, and I don't know, around the Eiffel Tower, they were everywhere, pickpocketers.
Right.
Interesting, but no, I don't know, not the right person to ask that question.
Maybe it's all a myth.
Maybe, but a lot of people love Paris, so personal preference. We will be back next week though. It's completely different. We've got a horror from 2019 called Eli. It's directed by Kieran Foy, stars Kelly Riley, Sadie Sink, Lily Taylor, Max Martini, and Charlie Shotwell. So I'm excited.
I never look ahead to watching it. I always wait to see you name like the director and the cast. And like my ears are working really hard if I recognize the name. And when you say a horror, I'm like, oh, I don't reckon I'm going to recognize any of these names. And when I don't recognize any of these names, I'm like, okay, I kind of already have a feel for what this movie might be like. So I'm looking forward to it. I love it. I love horror.
I have no context behind it either. Sadie Sink, that name rings a bell from one of the 180 things we've done. I reckon that might be my IMDb. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. That name does ring a bell.
Not for me, it doesn't. But Sadie, maybe. Was there a character called Sadie that we did?
Possibly.
I don't know. All right, we'll discuss it next week.
You've got a better memory than me, so you've probably already proven me wrong. So,
I could just be flat out wrong. But looking forward to it. I love horror movies.
Good. All right, I'll see you then next week.
See you then.